Okay, welcome to the newest rendition of the All Things Richmond podcast, where we interview interesting Richmond folks that have their finger on the pulse of all things Richmond. So, lucky enough today to be joined by Marc Cheatham, but I've been told to call you Cheats.
Cheats is fine.
So, Cheats,
Yeah, works good.
welcome to the studio.
Thanks for having me.
Meaning my office.
That's
It's
lovely.
thank you. Tell the viewers a little bit about your background, Richmond. How long you've been here, where you went to school, etc.
So I was born and raised here on the West End, Henrico.
Where'd you go to high school?
Tucker High School,
Tucker
the mighty Tigers.
What year did you finish there?
96.
Okay, my wife finished in 98.
Very nice.
Yeah.
So there's a good chance that we know each other.
Did you play basketball?
All right, so I don't know if you know, I'm sitting down, but
Yeah.
I am 5'5".
They make point guards,
And
right? Point guards.
My freshman year of high school, I was 4'9".
Okay.
I was 4'9", and I did play basketball. This is a fun
Okay.
fact. So I did play basketball, but in my freshman year of high school, I was 4'9". I want to say 89 pounds.
Okay.
I played football, basketball, and baseball my freshman year.
Okay.
I played basketball my sophomore year, and then I played baseball all 4 years.
Gotcha.
But there was a time where when my growth spurt hit and I ended up at about 5'2",
Yeah.
I realized that basketball was not going to be
Wasn't gonna pay the
my
bills.
long-term future, right? Like
Yeah.
hopefully I'll still be able to get out and play someday.
The reason I ask is my wife's dad coached JV and freshman ball there, Don Burnett. He may have been right after you though. Does that ring a
So
bell?
Don Burnett,
Yeah.
this is a true story. This is you had no idea about
I didn't.
this,
No.
but this is a true story. Don was a little league basketball coach of mine. I
Right.
never coached him at Tucker,
Okay.
but Don was my little league basketball coach,
Yeah.
and like whatever basketball talent I have
Yeah.
in that regard, he was probably the best little league basketball coach I've ever had. Please
He'll be
tell
glad
him.
to hear it.
Please tell him I said hello. I mean,
he's not on Facebook, but his wife is my mother-in-law, is Susan. Yeah.
son Gray.
Yeah, Gray. Yeah.
And Gray, I mean, sure was super old. I mean, this is Gray. This is before Gray was born. This
Yep.
is when
Yeah.
Don was my coach. But please tell him I said
So
hello.
you maximize your talent. So
He
that's
was
all you can ask for.
one of the best little league coaches, basketball coaches. It was one of those rec leagues where you practice like a half an hour
Yeah.
before the game and play the game.
Right.
I just remember him being one of the nicest human beings and a great leader of young men. So
That's
it's a great
awesome.
kid. Tell him I said
That's
what's
all.
up.
Yeah, I'm glad
He's
that
a-
went well. I'm
he's
glad
a
it didn't
good
go
dude.
awkwardly on now that we're rolling.
No,
That's
Don's
funny.
a great guy. I hope he's doing well.
That's
I
awesome.
haven't
Well,
seen him in years.
I'll tell him you said hello.
Small world there. That's what Richmond does for you.
So, went to VCU,
Yes.
studied social work.
Yes.
When
yes.
you were at VCU, what did you want to do? Did you know at that
I
time?
wanted to be a social worker.
Okay.
I really did. I really thought I was going to work in youth homes and kind of do that type of thing. I always had a passion to try to help people.
Mm-hmm.
And social work just seemed two things. Social work allowed me to help people, one, and it didn't require any math.
Mm-hmm.
So I was really hard. Like most social workers are
Yeah.
really bad at math. And I was a horrible math student. I was actually a better math student in college, but I was a
Mhm.
really poor math student in high school, and that always put the fear in me. And so, social work seemed fitting, and it really was a good major for me. I don't think it was a great major. It was a good major for me. I know I said that wrong. It was a good fit for me. I don't
Right.
think it was a perfect fit for me,
Right.
but it was a good fit for me, and I thought I was going to go on and work with youth and,
Right.
maybe end up at a youth home or a boys' home, get involved in sports and that stuff. My life did not turn out that way, but
Right.
that is what I thought was going to happen.
Gotcha.
And probably when I entered college, I think I
Mhm.
knew by my junior year is when I met my boss that I work for now, and I kind of knew that was all out the window.
Gotcha. And that boss being Tim Kaine.
Tim Kaine, yes.
So how did that come to be?
The Junior Center of Virginia.
How did
yeah.
you meet him?
I interned. I was an intern. So, I want to get the timeline right. This is a true story though. When I really got into college, and it was the John Kerry presidential election versus, so it was George W. Bush's re-election. John Kerry
Right.
was running for president.
2004, right?
I think so. Yeah, it was 2004. So it turns out that at the time there were 8 people on the Democratic side running for president.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd kind of narrowed my choices down being here in Virginia to either John Kerry or John Edwards. And Kerry was a sitting senator that actually headquartered out of D.C.
Mm-hmm.
John Edwards was a former senator, so he had actually moved his headquarters to North Carolina.
Right.
And literally it was at the time, this is 2004. Let's caveat this.
Right.
This is well before we knew kind of the full story of John Edwards, right?
Right.
They were both really attractive candidates for me at the time, and it was almost like a flip a coin. But what happened was John Kerry gave me an internship while he was running for president. I didn't know at the time that they accepted everyone. So I really thought I felt like they sent you this letter.
Right.
I was like, "Welcome to the Kerry campaign."
Right.
And really, what they did that to everyone. I walked in the door and there were 16 interns.
Right.
All of them were from American, George Washington, or Georgetown.
Okay.
I was the only one that was from Richmond.
Right.
And so that kind of stood out to them, and they do this whole thing. This is a roundabout way, and I'll cut it short. But they do this roundabout thing about why you want to be an intern for a presidential campaign. And all of these guys from Georgetown, George Washington, American had these amazing stories about why they wanted to be an intern, like change the world,
Right.
and really into this.
Right.
And it gets to me, and I was like, yeah, I really like the show West Wing. So I really thought, like, if it's anything like West Wing, I want to do that.
I'm in, yeah.
And so they all laughed, and I realized that at the time, these guys were probably only a couple years. The people that were doing the interview was only a couple years older than me.
Yeah.
Long story short, though, is I had a really good internship in Washington with the Kerry campaign.
Yeah.
And after that was over, they were like, "Well, Mark, you're moving back to Richmond. You really should get involved and work with." At the time, it was Governor Warner, Lieutenant Governor Kane. And there was this whole governor's fellows process, which is really extensive for Governor Warner's office or any governor at the time. And I was just like, I don't have time to do that. And then literally the lady said to me, this wonderful lady who I still stay in contact with to this day, she goes, "Well, you should just intern for Tim Kaine. They take anyone." And so I was like, all right. So I walked into the lieutenant governor's office, a full staff of 3 people at the time.
Yeah.
And I started interning that summer of I was going into my junior year. No, yeah, it was my junior year, I think. And I started interning for Tim Kaine. And as I tell most people, I really haven't had a real job since the day I met him the first day of my internship. And I've been on the Kaine train ever since.
That's great. That's a long time. It's a long run with anybody. So
it is
pretty interesting. I guess last 14 years or so.
It's been a while. Yes, I'm really old.
So what do you do for him now?
So I'm the director of his casework operation and his constituents operation for the state. So we have 6 offices throughout the state. Each of those offices do some form of casework, which is helping Virginians with federal issues. Immigration, veteran services, Social Security are our big ones. Housing, just about anything that affects the federal government that we have a stake in. And so I do help. Our team does our best to help as many constituents as best we can.
Gotcha. That's fascinating. So what involvement do you have locally with politics? City council, mayor? Do you chat with LeVar? Do you know the city council folks?
I know a lot of them through the Cheats Movement blog and the Cheats Movement podcast. So I know we cover on the site that I run and the brand that we have. We are pretty involved in local Richmond region issues, and so that's how I know most of the local politicians. Either that, or I've just been around the city so long that I've come across them. It's a little bit of a pretty strong line of separation in regards to the blog doesn't cover anything that would be a conflict of interest on the federal side.
Right.
So we really kind of weigh into locally on the site. We weigh into we cover the mayor's race pretty heavily. We've interviewed a number of city council members, and we're kind of building that brand as a local and regional. So it's Henrico, mostly Richmond and Henrico, to be honest. We don't really touch Chesterfield and Hanover too much.
Right.
But I think Henrico and Richmond have such unique government ties. It's interesting.
Yeah, so let's go back to the beginning of the Cheats Movement. 2011, you started the Cheats Movement blog. Tell me about why you started and what it is.
So, yes, I started in 2011. I started the Cheats Movement in my home, my home office.
Sure, wherever good business starts.
Yeah, it was a slow weekend. Read a WordPress book. I was traveling a lot at the time, and I was pretty much disconnected from Richmond. We were doing a lot of work across the nation, and I was employed by the DNC. I wasn't actually employed by of Virginia. You know, I
Mhm.
wasn't like Tim Kaine was chairman of the DNC. I was working for the DNC, and at the time we started the blog in 2011, it was a way for me to stay connected to the city through just going to events. So it's like me and my friends, when I would be in town, would go out to an event, whether it was a First Friday, uh, whether it was just a festival,
Mhm.
and I would take my camera with me, would take a bunch of pictures of us just goofing off,
Mhm.
and we'd put those pictures up on the site. So it was much more of a photography based site when we first started in 2011. That lasted about, I don't know, 6 months or so
Mhm.
before people started asking me to either shoot an event specifically, or just try to find out, like, figure out a different angle.
Mhm.
And so what happened was, a good friend of mine, local MC in town by the name of Black Liquid.
Mhm.
Black Liquid invited me out to one
Who's
of
going to be
his.
on this podcast soon?
He is.
Yeah.
God, get ready. Facebook Live or whoever.
Yeah.
Get ready for that show. That's gonna be special.
I'm looking forward to it.
But he invited me out to one of his Face Mount Friday shows, which was at Strange Matter. I wound up shooting that, just me, covering. These shows have probably like 20 acts on them.
Mhm.
We shot about 20 MCs that night and put them up on the blog. And it took about 2 hip hop events for people to start to realize that this was a site where you could go and see some coverage, like kind of news coverage of a hip hop show.
Mhm.
And what we found out was there was just a big void. There's a big void in media. There's a big void in Richmond media. They didn't touch it. They didn't cover
Mhm.
local hip hop. So we started highlighting local hip hop probably throughout the fall of 2011, going into 2012 pretty heavily, and
Mhm.
it became one of the bigger. It became the only. So he's like, it's easy to say, oh, it became the biggest, but it
Mhm.
was really the only local independent hip hop site at the time
Mhm.
that was covering hip hop shows, hip hop album releases, and so it did become it became a pretty popular site in regards to people that wanted to learn more about the Richmond hip hop scene,
Mhm.
and so we kind of ran with that,
Mhm.
and so we every kind of year we were building on uh, that audience,
Mhm.
and what we learned from building on that audience. Fast forward, years down the line, it's like, okay, we can cover music, but we can also cover other things,
Mhm.
and that's how we really branched into local politics, community events, and now it's much more of a brand that covers a larger spectrum
Mhm.
of our community in that way. So we're excited
Awesome.
about it. We're excited about
Uh,
what happened.
yeah, that's exciting seeing the evolution of that, how it started and what it is today. It's pretty interesting. So, covering local politics, did you guys get heavily involved in the mayoral race last year?
Yeah. So last year we covered the mayor's race pretty heavy. Where I thought that was one of the, and I say last year,
I guess a year and a half ago
it was a
now.
year and a
Yeah.
half ago now.
Mm-hmm.
But we did this thing that was like, we made these power rankings
Yeah.
in regards to who we thought was gonna win
Right.
the mayor's race, and we would have power rankings, and we would have local coverage of how the elections were going, and those turned out to be pretty well received.
Mm-hmm.
One of the fun facts is we never had LeVar Stoney, we never had Mayor Stoney at the top of the
Mm-hmm.
power ranking until maybe the very last one.
Yeah.
We might have had him, and like we made it like we understood that it was probably going to be a two-way race between him and Jack Berry at the very end.
Right.
But like all the power rankings leading up to it, LeVar was in the second tier of candidates.
Right.
And like most people, we had Morrissey higher than we had Morrissey overperforming
Right.
and LeVar underperforming. And the funny fact is, we interviewed him. We were his first interview. Chiefs Movement was his first interview in his transition office,
Mm-hmm.
and he reminded me of that. He reminded me that
you had him in third or worse leading up till.
we lowballed him, and so I told him I'd make it up to him as best I could.
Well, at the time, I think you weren't the only folks handicapping it that way. That was the general consensus.
Yeah, no, nobody could have. We also got to think, like, one, Morrissey had a horrible last week and a half.
He did.
Right?
He really did.
he's like, if you're looking at the political spectrum of that race,
Yeah.
Morrissey had a horrible, like, final week and a half. Like,
Yeah.
literally a week and a half before the election, he's having press conferences on his, like, front porch that are being crashed by, like, his
Sure.
wife's dad. It was
Yeah.
awful. And
Yeah.
so, and then he got sued. And so all of that, here's the thing, all of that may not have affected his outcome. I think what happened was that there was a push poll. This is well into the weeds, but there was a poll that came out early on. I think it was the Richmond Times-Dispatch or somebody else did the poll. But they published this poll that said Morrissey was a front runner, and everybody kind of ran with that. And it turns out that he wasn't nearly as strong in those higher number districts that we thought. We thought it was going to be. And the other thing that turned out to be, we didn't see, but we should have. I think some of us may have seen it, but I think maybe it just was different. Is because the presidential ticket was on the ballot. The second district was a district that actually ultimately broke for LeVar. The reason it broke for LeVar was because VCU is in the second district. A lot of VCU kids were voting for the first time. They were voting for the presidential, and LeVar, to his credit, worked extremely harder than Jack Berry at VCU. So all of those kids that turned, you just couldn't estimate what that number was going to be of first-time voters. But that was the district that put LeVar over the top. That's the one they didn't think he was going to get. He got it. They put him over the top, and he actually won on Election Day. Had he not won the second with those VCU kids, or if you take the VCU kids out of the equation, you would have been in a runoff. It would have been the 6 weeks later, and you really don't know what would have happened.
It would have been a bit of a crapshoot then.
But it was interesting. It played out interesting. It was a spectacle that only Richmond could present. But one of the important things about that race and just about any other race is and this is why I think sites like the Cheats movement are important, is you have this tendency to think that like the community of readers that read the site are only reading it for music. And that nothing could be further from the truth. We look at the numbers every year. The biggest posts we get have to do with community issues, whether it's a racial event that happened at Short Pump Middle School, whether it's a blackface incident that happened at the former Balaso. Those, having people weigh in on those issues and having their voice heard does astronomically better than, oh, we've got a great new song, or here's a new album review. And those things are important. I think a lot of people check this site consistently to see what's going on in culture. But when you really tap something that hits the community, whether it's the first big thing we ever did was, I think it was 2011, maybe in that fall of 2011, there was a big controversy around First Fridays about too many kids coming to First Fridays. Those kids happened to be black and brown kids, and the gallery owners didn't know what to do with it. And we published a photo essay of, this is the way we see First Fridays, a bunch of kids and these great pictures of First Fridays. And it was it just blew up the site. Like it wound up getting picked up by a number of different publications. But it was because no one was speaking to that audience, No one journalistically was making an effort to talk to, I don't know, 20, I won't even tell myself short. I would say 25 to 40 urban community. They just weren't hitting it. So we were able to hit a lot of that and do some real good, I think.
That's interesting. So what, I guess, what's your criteria when deciding what to post, how often, how to balance the hip hop versus overall politics versus community?
I wish we had.
Is there a science to it?
No,
or just whatever you're feeling at the time?
Not at all. Just what we think.
But naturally, I guess
I think is fun. What I think is, I'll tell you though, we filter more. We filter more than having a rhyme or reason about what goes up. We pretty much have a strong criteria of what doesn't go up, right? And so, I being connected to hip hop, there's a lot of hip hop that won't make the site. Even if I like you as an artist, even if I like your music, even if I like now I'm smart enough to realize that there's just too many eyes on the site for me to be there's lines we won't cross.
You mind sharing what those are?
Most people know, you will never see gratuitous sex and violence or drug gratuitous drug use and those types of things. Whether I might no matter how I feel about you as an artist, no matter how much I feel about your art, even if it's a shock and awe piece. I am smart enough to realize the phone calls I get.
You have a broad audience.
The audience is. We took great pride in the audience
Yeah.
of the Cheats movement. And so if you haven't checked it out, please do. But it's everyone from. I'll never forget. I wrote an editorial about the baseball stadium in Chaco Bottom,
Mm-hmm.
and I thought, in my humble opinion,
Mm-hmm.
I thought that it was equally objective on both sides, right?
Mm-hmm.
So there was part of it that was like, hey, look, we had this big press conference at the time with Mayor Jones in Chaco Bottom that announced that the stadium was coming down here with a museum and a grocery store and so forth. Like, that was a really good press conference for optics, but they hadn't had a good day since. This was weeks and months later.
Sure, yeah.
And then at the same time, I wrote, but at the same time, if Chaco Bottom at the time looks like, in 10 years when my son's 10, he can go to a baseball game, or my son's 3, he can go to a baseball game now. But it was like, if my son goes to the same Chaco Bottom that we're looking at the time of that press conference, I think we failed. Like, I think if it doesn't get better, I don't want to, I want to see a thriving Chaco Bottom. I think Main Street Station helps, right? But I did not want to see, failed restaurant, failed nightclub. I was excited about the opportunity of seeing something different.
Right.
At the same time, there was just a lot of problems. So I remember thinking like, hey, this is important. I think I did an objective article.
Right.
The first call I got was someone in the mayor's office, livid. And the second call I got was somebody from the ancestors group that was, protesting.
So you pissed off both sides.
Livid.
Well
And it
done.
turned out, and I just remember thinking to
Yeah.
myself, like, geez, I need to pay more attention. Like, I had no idea that
Yeah.
this would be a thing.
Yeah.
But it turned out to be a thing for that week, and then something else happened, and we were gone.
Yeah, man. Yeah.
But
That's
it was
an
funny to
interesting
see how broad the audience is.
Yeah. That's a whole. God, that's a topic I'm going to talk about more. But we have a limited time here.
Right.
We interviewed Brian Bostic on this, who was a big proponent of moving it down there. He was leading the charge, and obviously I've heard both sides, and I won't share with the audience my views on it. But it was such a hot topic for such a long period of time. Okay, so let's talk about
Sure.
On the Cheats Movement website, one of the things happening now. Tell me more about the hoodies you're selling.
Right. So we, in partnership with Noah Scalin, an amazing artist in Richmond. I think he was named, last year, the first ever artist in resident at the VC School of Business. But Noah is just world, like, he's just renowned up and down the East Coast and probably farther about his art. He's just an amazing artist. He lives here on North Side in Richmond. And he had come to me with a design, and it's basically the Lee statue without Lee on it. It's just like the base of the statue with nothing on top.
Right.
He had this kind of wonderful background about it, and was like, he really strongly believed that those Confederate statues were in the wrong place. And I tend to agree with him in the sentiment of that. He had come to me with the design. I thought the design was amazing. And then we sat on it for probably 4, 5, 6 weeks trying to figure out. He had actually issued some out to World of Mirth in Carytown, and they were selling them for charity. But we really thought, all right, what's the next step with this thing? And what we wanted to do as a brand, what I've always wanted to do was to have a meaning behind the brand. Right? The Cheats Movement needs to mean something.
Right.
And one of the things that we've always done, and one of the reasons why I think it's lasted the way it has and grown the way it has, is because the message behind the brand has always been kind of an inclusive, diverse Richmond that really kind of errs on the side of bringing more people to the table than bringing less. And so I say all that because we decided to change the logo or adjust the logo and put them on some hooded sweatshirts on November 1st of last year. And it was just our way of saying that this is we can use this as our version of activism. It's our way of starting discussions. At the time, you got to think. So we released the hoodies the first round of hoodies were released on November 1st. Mayor Stoney had announced his Monument Avenue commission early August, I want to say, and then Charlottesville's rally happened on August 12th.
Right.
And so it was a really hot topic at the time, and we all felt as if we wanted to weigh in on it, but we wanted to weigh in on it that wasn't violent. We wanted to weigh in on it in a way that wasn't a direct confrontation of the alt-right.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people felt that way. I think a lot of people wanted to be able to say, hey, look, I'm fine if this thing goes away.
Right. Right.
And what it has done, and what I'm really proud of, is that it has sparked a lot of discussions from both sides of the aisle. I've had more discussions about the future of Monument Avenue with people that disagree with me than people that do.
Right.
Oftentimes we agree to disagree in a respectful way. They're different, and then I learned that people that I would think would agree with me may have different opinions on the ultimate resolution on Monument Avenue. It's been my stance that I strongly believe that there are more fitting places for public display of Confederate statues. I understand that Monument Avenue, the way I understand what Monument is today.
Right.
I understand when those statues were put up and why they were put up and how they were put up. And I think if more people understood that they weren't put up, they were put up well after the Civil War, and they were put up as a way of showing strength and dominance over one community over the other. It was not. It was not a like everybody was not like, oh, let's do this, for property value or anything like that. No, it was it was a show of force by the people that were in power to people that looked like me and others, and so I can't understand fully get an understanding of that history and then agree with you. Right. I can get an understanding of that history and have a conversation with you.
Sure.
I can actually understand your point of view if you are disagreeing with me. I just can't agree with you for it.
Right.
And so we released those hoodies on November 1st. We followed them up with a couple of other hoodie orders and a couple other T-shirt orders. They're still actually on sale now, and it has been eye-opening, to say the least, in regard to how it has made an impact on kind of our daily lives and the site. My email's a little bit different every once in a while, but it's something that we truly stand behind. And we've had a couple other folks did ask, like, well, you have a podcast and you have a blog. Have you ever had discussions about Monument Avenue, the future of Monument Avenue? Right. And we had a really good one that I'll just tell your audience about. Is if you look at the table, we had a roundtable discussion with Bill Martin from the Valentine, Julian Hayter from University of Richmond, who was just featured on 60 Minutes. Ted Elmore was in that group. We had like a wonderful roundtable discussion. Noah was in that group about Monument Avenue. Let's talk about it. And it was a diverse audience. It was just a really good discussion, and that's still online on our podcast archives. And those things do help shape my opinion. I think I had a pretty strong opinion about the issue beforehand, but it does shape my opinion in regards to what I want the future to look like in our city, right? So I've got a 3-year-old, and I constantly, there's not a day goes by that I don't think, like, is this going to be better for Cameron?
Right.
10 years from now, 15 years from now.
Sure.
And this is one, to me, that is just a no-brainer. I would like him to live in a future, like 15 years from now, 20 years from now, because it's not going to be right away, no matter what anybody thinks.
Right.
But 15, 20 years from now, I'd love him to drive down Monument Avenue and see something different than we see today.
Yeah. Well, that's great, man. That's awesome work. So we like to close with 5 questions that we ask everybody. I'm gonna alter yours a little.
Go so fast. I'm sorry.
No, it's great. It's great content that I think our viewers will love.
AJ set the mark so high.
You can see how many likes or how many views you get compared to AJ.
None.
You guys can have a battle.
I stopped playing those like games a long time ago. I really.
Well, Whit will tell you the way whether you're hitting or not.
I'm so proud of
how many views
all your other guests do.
Yeah.
I will leave it at that.
All right. So the first question I'll alter and change for you with your involvement in the local hip hop scene. So the question 1 is, what are 3 local hip hop artists that we should know about that are in the Richmond area now?
Oh man, there's so many, and people are gonna get mad at me.
Well, if you want to
if
name
I
one, if you want to
limit.
name 10, name whoever you want to name that our
Um,
viewers should check out.
I mean, you can't like. So all right, so 3 albums today,
Mm-hmm.
and this is easy for me because like Michael Million's album,
Mm-hmm.
Hard to Be King is out. Radio B's album, Jesus Never Wore a Suit is out. And Joey Gallo and Nicole Hicks has got a joint album that's out. So those are easy for me,
Right.
In that regard, because but Noah O, DJ Mentos, Mutant Academy, everything that they're doing. There's just so many. Satellite Syndicate, everything they're doing. Obliv, everything that they're doing. New Era Ness, what he's doing. Soup, Prop. Like, I mean, everybody's just that. Like, the scene is so good now. They're in such a good place.
Yeah. So the scene
It's
now,
just,
2018
yeah.
compared to 2011 when the Cheats movement started. How would you compare and contrast?
It's better.
Just
like,
better,
I
more.
mean, yeah, you give. I mean, we're going on. It's the community so much better because technology's better, digital's better, and so the products that artists can release are better.
Mm-hmm.
They can get discovered. There's just more access to discovery.
Right.
So, and I think what happens now is you just got to figure out what level of success you want to be at.
Mm-hmm.
Richmond is still not quote unquote a hotbed of hip hop per se.
Right.
But if you are consistent, you work hard enough, you travel, you do the things that you need to, you have an opportunity to carve out a place. It may not be, you're not going to be Drake or J. Cole, but there's tons of working artists that have careers, they make money, they do it. And I think that's what it's all about. I think some of the challenge in 2018 is people lose focus on what success is.
Right.
Grady City Records can go to California, do records. They can be in Richmond and do records. And it's like, and they're happy, man. Like,
right.
They don't necessarily have to be Drake. Like, you know what I mean? Not everyone's going to be that level of success.
Sure. Awesome. Okay. So, favorite restaurant in Richmond?
The Roosevelt.
No hesitation, just Roosevelt, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I just love the Roosevelt. I love what Kendra does. So, big shout out to them. Big fan of the Savory Grain as well. Sad Zone, big fan of Sad Zone, what they do. Mama J's and Croaker Spot, we're always, big fans of what they do. Richmond's, that's one thing. They can't oversell you on our restaurant scene.
Sure.
Richmond's done a really good job. It's growing. I went to Scott's Edition the other day. Shout out, like, lunch and supper. No, but I mean, I went there the other day and literally was just blown away by all the new stuff. Like, they can't, like, I didn't even know half that stuff existed. And it was like, so you can't overstate the growing restaurant scene, and I know it comes and goes. Huge shout out to Black Restaurant Week that just finished up, I want to say a couple weeks ago. All the restaurants, I mean, that grew in 1 year, just grew amazingly large, and they just had so many restaurants that were Black-owned, represented so well. So big shout out to them. But yeah, like, you can't overstate Richmond's restaurant scene.
Sure. Great. Yeah, I agree. All right, so last question. So you've got a friend coming into Richmond for the weekend who doesn't know Richmond. You're going to show them around town. So they get there Friday, they leave Sunday. What do you do with that person that weekend?
It's tough. It depends on what weekend it is.
You can make it any weekend
Richmond
you want it to be.
changes so much.
Yeah.
Richmond changes so much by day to day. I'll reframe your question a little bit, because one of the things that I don't even get out to enough, but if they happen to be here during any, like, Tuesday, low-hanging fruit for me is Tuesday Versus. You should definitely check out Tuesday Versus, which is every Tuesday. It's by far the best open mic in Richmond.
Where's that?
I think it's at Adise downtown every Tuesday night in Shaka Bottom.
Gotcha.
Lyricist Lounge is once a month. Face Melt Friday. So Lyricist Lounge is like a proving ground now for hip hop artists to come to. They should definitely check that out. What was the other one? Face Melt Friday is another kind of just staple now. Black Liquid's been doing that for a long time. Brewers Cafe, you gotta check out Brewers Cafe. I know you had AJ on, but that's a great spot for just community and culture. There's just so many, and I'm just trying to. I would really tailor it through. I would really tailor it through what weekend it is.
Right.
We just went. Me and my dad and my brother and a good friend of ours, went to a Richmond Rough Rider game for the first time last Saturday.
Brian
Who would have
Randall.
thought?
Yeah.
It was extremely entertaining.
Yeah.
Who would? Yeah, it was extremely entertaining. So who would have thought? Like, things like that in Richmond are amazing.
Yeah.
I just wrote a piece for Richmond Magazine about all the ways you can enjoy baseball in Richmond, and people don't think about this, but from Little League to high school to college baseball in Richmond, all the way up to the Squirrels.
Sure.
Richmond is an amazing baseball town.
Yeah.
And I'll say this because I called it my hidden gem of that article, but you can go to the University of Richmond if you look at their schedule and check a baseball game for absolutely free at one of the best stadiums I've seen in the city. Like, it's just Pitt Field on the campus of UR is a great environment for baseball, and college baseball is a lot of fun.
Yeah.
The Squirrels are amazing. We'll talk. We talked a little bit about the old stadium. If I could tell you anything, I hope they do keep this. Make it so that the Squirrels are here for a long time. They've been amazing for the city. So it just really depends. There's bacon festivals. There's all kinds of things.
Yeah, that was a great answer. Some of the stuff I love and some of the stuff I don't know about, and I would love to check out. So cool. Well, so where can people find you on social media? How do they find the Cheats movement?
Yeah, the Cheats movement on everything. I think Twitter shortens it to just Cheats movement, but it's the Cheats movement on everything. The blog is thecheatsmovement.com. Yeah, we're just gonna try to keep it going and figure out the best ways to highlight the city and be involved as best we can.
Well, with all of our, from our viewers, all of our Richmonders, people like you make Richmond more interesting and fun, a better place to live. So thanks for what you do for Richmond, and thanks for coming on. We appreciate it.
Till next time.